I tend to work in ways, or have always worked in the past in ways where I have really specific ideas, and it's like really, really exact. And I realized that, you know, that can only get me so much. And I think I realized that finding accidents and introducing accident into a situation really helps me a lot and helps me kind of discover things. And I think I found that by writing music for an ensemble, or however you want to think of having a rock band, that was how I operated in a rock band, was writing, like really like practically just writing out music exactly that people played. But that it didn't have that energy of finding something, I guess, of discovering something while you're in the process of working or in the process of creating. And I during the time that I was playing in rock bands, I started seeing people perform solo that were able to get kind of this same sort of like layered experience that you would get with a band. And I guess I just, for some reason, I mean, maybe it was just those specific people, but I guess they seemed to be working with the same sort of material, I would say, that I was working with in terms of like subtlety and whatnot, and feel. Maybe it wasn't the same sounds, but it was sort of yeah, just in the same ballpark. But they were getting, I felt like they were getting more out of it than by themselves than I was with a band. And so I just started doing what I'm doing now based on the idea of just wanting to do something by myself. I say all this though, and it's come full circle, because now I'm like, just as of the last couple of months, I'm looking into ways that I can perform with other people. And now my installation work, it's not about me performing at all. It's about engaging with an audience and how, like, the social interaction involved. And so in that sense, you know, I have to come back around to that, and those I'm sort of dealing with those issues again, but just in a different way. I had the same experience with both of them, or I had the same experience watching people experience both of those pieces, because both of those pieces basically there's a very low level of sound for a period of time that's like very easily located, and then something happens, you know, with the architecture of both of those pieces, that a larger sound created by all things starts to encompass everyone. And both of those pieces were made with the idea of having something that people could talk during, because all of my normal solo performance, it's like, you know, okay, sit down, be quiet, and pay really close attention, and it sort of demands that. And I wanted something that could give people a similar experience and take people to the same place, but without sort of forcing them into it with, like, I don't know, dictatorial confines, you know, or rules like that. And basically both of those pieces, without me saying anything, you know, this sound comes and overtakes everything and everyone in the middle of it. Just showing those pieces to everyone just decided to be quiet and sit down or keep walking around or whatever. But I think that it seemed that people got the same depth of experience out of that. It was just a completely different listening environment and sort of a different dramatic stage. And I guess that both of those pieces were not necessarily an end. I felt like they sparked just more of an interest with me in, like, okay, well, how can I make you know, environments that are engaging, that are, you know, where there's sort of a listening environment and a listening format that's kind of embedded in the piece itself. And you know, it's sort of like inventing a cassette deck or inventing a hi-fi stereo system for each piece, I guess. And that I want to make a different environment that has different rules and different ways of people interacting with it, and then interacting with each other. the video almost halfway functions as a sort of social rule in the performance work. I mean, it in one way says, you know, even though I don't really intend for people to look at that video because it's more lighting, but people see it and they go, okay, well, this is something I'm supposed to sit down and be quiet and look at. And so it does define, you know, some rules in that setting. I mean, I had the video for, just purpose of lighting and purpose of kind of creating an environment and creating a pulse. I think that's all sort of my process for the performance pieces, where, I mean, you know, I record an instrumentalist or I take field recordings. Often it's a mix of the two, but I mean, they're just processed to the point of not being able to recognize that source sound. But I guess I'm also kind of thinking in terms of like, how can I get really, really pure with this sound? How can I make it something that's really textural, but still kind of feels like it has an identity in the way that the source that I had, you know, had an identity, you know, I guess, you know, harp or guitar or whatever. But the same thing with, I mean, with the video. The video is just, it's always light sources, and I'm always like basically just trying to shoot the movement of the light source and just capture the movement, but without revealing even that it's a light source. I guess people always seem to think that it's something much more concrete than a light bulb. It's just like the filament, like shot really close and slowed down. But people see all kinds of things. I guess it's like fire watching or whatnot. But I guess to me that is kind of interesting, that you can take something and simplify it so much that it becomes this complex thing that people perceive. I wonder if that, I'm thinking about that in terms of the visual, but I wonder how much that happens in terms of the sound. I don't know. I think I'm always sort of conscious of, you know, whatever space I'm working in. Like, I'm conscious of it from, you know, the center of the room to the outside of the room. I'm thinking in terms of the whole thing, you know, and that includes, you know, what's on the walls and what that might define. I think that's my inclination, is just to use, you know, whatever is there and available to the fullest extent possible, and use it dynamically. Which means you don't have to use the whole room all of the time. You can use part of the room. I mean, at the same time, I guess I felt like, just in experimenting with putting speakers around a room for my performed project, I just found that there was, you know, there's a dynamic that happens. You know, I mean, dynamics doesn't just have to be playing louder or softer. It can be location. It can be location of sound, and it can be size of sound. I mean, you can have something coming from two speakers across a room from each other and out of phase with each other, and it sounds, it can sound huge, it can sound small, but it just has that can have a completely different feel than something that's pinpointed in one place. And, you know, if you work between the two, that's a dynamic. It's not necessarily soft to loud, loud to soft either. It's another compositional tool. I guess for some period of time, when I sort of moved into the solo performance, I sort of, in my mind, I stopped thinking of myself as a musician and trying to put the label sound artist on it in my head. But actually, the more I've kind of moved forward with this, and even making these installed type projects, the more I realize that it really is, I'm still acting on the level of a musician, and I'm still thinking in those terms. And for me, this is just, you know, sort of answering a question of, you know, what can I do now as a musician that feels fresh and new to me, as opposed to just, you know, playing an instrument. And so, I mean, it's more of a layered thing, because you don't see me sitting in front of the synthesizer making all of the things that you hear. So there's not, I guess that level's taken out of it, but I'm still, in some way, there's still like a performer to audience relationship. It's just not directed at me as the musician here. I guess the gesture is just in the sound that you hear, and less in the visualization of me as a performer on a stage. Well, and the performance exists, but then it's also ultimately kind of skewed by the format that this is presented in. It's not, I mean, I made these things to actually, all the sounds that come out of the different speakers were made to kind of coordinate with each other, but then you're never going to actually hear them coordinated exactly. It's all kind of thrown.